You are listening to the BowhunterPlanet podcast, Season 6. The podcast is supported by Scent Crusher, Scent Off, Game On, Tinks, Cat Work Truck, Victory Archery, Thorn Broadheads, Shadow Hunter Blinds, Cobra Archery, Burris, HHA Sports and HHA USA, Reveal Cellular Cameras, and Deer Camp Coffee. Enjoy the show. Hey guys, and welcome to the BowhunterPlanet podcast. Dave Thomas here along with Tim Mazzarana. Today we got a special guest. He is another YouTuber, but he also has an amazing store, and that's one of the things I want to kind of talk to you guys about tonight with him. Josh Jones, welcome to the show, my friend. Most people know you as a Podium archer, and it reflects obviously your store, and it's a very cool thing. So how's it going, man? How you been?
Fantastic, really. Just been trying to keep up. There's not enough hours in the day to try to do it all. And the response that we've gotten over the past several years has been incredible. So it's just growth upon growth upon growth, and then trying to manage and maintain that and find hours in the day becomes tricky, but I've been doing great. Can't complain too much.
Are you finding, so a lot of the feedback, because we're not like a bow shop, so we don't see it from your level when it comes to consumers buying things. And one of the things that's been going on for us, at least, that we're noticing in the industry is a lot of, bows are hard to get. Like they're just, I feel like, companies are, lining them up, trying to get them out to you guys to sell them and all that. I mean, are you guys still seeing that like hard to get demand, or has it been easier to get the bows this year?
Well, it's similar to last year, but it's not quite as bad in my experience. But we're kind of a little different animal when it comes to that. I'm pretty good about forecasting and being in constant communication with the manufacturer on what their lead times are, and then I over order accordingly. So because of that, I rarely ever run out of stuff. I almost always have it, but I'll have, like right now, for example, in Excel, I have an order every 2 weeks for the next year and a half.
Wow.
And individual item orders, like they're in the system already. So when they start to backlog, I can find out where they're changing it at and go back and modify it and add to it. So it helps compensate for it. And most manufacturers will work with you that way if you just give them a picture of what to look at. But like bows, I've been ordering bows for 6-8 months ahead. And in more than I expect to sell. And then if I end up to where I have a surplus at some point and it doesn't look like they're moving, then I'll cancel the extended orders that are past that. But like I placed orders for Matthews in mid to late September. I mean, I didn't know technically what they were, but technically I did, but they still didn't have access to them just because of building Dan's bow. So I saw one of them because he got that early. But yeah, I turn stuff in really early and in high quantity, and I take risks and a lot of it. Like not knowing how the bows are going to be perceived, not knowing how they feel. I just order a bunch. My opening orders with every bow company was 100 bows minimum, and Matthews was 200. And as soon as I got the bows, I went back and reordered again and again. And I will talk to most of them weekly and ask what their lead time is and monitor that. And as it grows, I just order more to compensate for that. But it's kind of scary and risky. You end up with a bunch of stuff at a certain point. But I haven't experienced that in the last 2 years. I've just sold what I've gotten, and it's just been a lot.
Yeah. What's your feeling on the consumers and their thoughts on the pricing? Because I mean, obviously, I know this too, because you got a YouTube channel as well. And some of the comments I'll see, a lot of people like, "Oh, these prices are getting outrageous," and da da da. I guess what are you seeing from your level, like in the sales portion of it, when people come in to look at a Matthews, a new Hoyt, a new Prime? Do they care the prices $1,100-$1,200, or they really don't care at that point?
I think 11 to 13 has become the new normal for most people. It's the ones that are above that start going, okay, what the hell? There's 1 out of 10 people that will even look at it at that point. They'll want to fire it, but they have no serious interest in spending $1,800-$1,900 on a bow. But I do get that as well. I mean, we were, I think, $100 to $150 a bow higher this year than last year across the board, and almost every vendor and everybody we dealt with. And I don't hear too many complaints, but we're also in a kind of unique situation. We're not in the middle of town. We're kind of off the beaten path, so we really only get people that are really looking and are really heavily interested, and they probably have an idea of what they're looking at financially before they ever come to see me. So I don't get as many complaints as they would. But my social media stuff and my YouTube responses, there's a lot of comments about that, and I think it's relevant, and I think it's real. We're experiencing inflation just like everything else, and a 10% increase isn't ridiculous considering everything else that we're seeing across the board. For companies that couldn't get aluminum all year, couldn't get materials, couldn't keep up with demand. I mean, to see a 10% hike, I know it's $100 or $150, but at the same time, I mean, it's only 10% for something that was very hard to get and you couldn't keep in stock. And and their costs and their employment costs and everything went up too. So I think 10% is really pretty reasonable. That being said, it'd be nice if we were still under $1,000 for a bow, but I don't think it's really realistic. I think we're gonna see growth, and we're gonna see with that increase, and there's no way around it.
How often do you see your customers repurchasing a bow? Do you see them upgrading their bow every year?
I'd say 10, 15 years ago, we probably saw that a lot. We saw a good percentage of people do a trade-in every year. This year, we've had a pretty good amount of trade-in, especially on Matthews, because we turn our trade-in bows in and turn around and sell them online because they're used at that point, and there's no rules against selling them online. And the Matthews especially seem to bring us still a really good penny for their used stuff. So it's not as hard to bite off. I mean, I think we traded in 2 bows today. I traded in a PSE NTN 33 and I think a V331. I think we turned in 2. So we'll trade in bows daily and just move them on. But I'd say maybe 1 out of 10 or 20 people might be considering a yearly purchase. It's really more a 3 to 5 year rotation for us for the most part. But if they bought last year's Matthews and they see this year's Matthews and they like it, it's more likely, just because it doesn't cost as much. It's only going to cost you $300 or $400 to make that jump instead of $500 or $600 or worse, depending on what it is. So,
do you see a lot of people switching brands when they're doing that, or if they bought Matthews, they're sticking with Matthews?
I think it's 50-50 in that. I think you're seeing a reasonable amount of people that are brand loyal, no different than Ford guys are Ford guys and Chevy guys are Chevy guys. And then the other half authentically try everything and have an open mind. Now, if they already have integral components that only fit on that bow, that makes it a lot harder to make that jump. Like if you've got to integrate rest Matthews, or you've got a Matthews quiver on your Matthews bow, it's harder to leave Matthews because now I got to buy a quiver. Now I got to buy a rest. So that same venture just costs another $400 or $500 more, or what have you. But I'd say it's 50-50 on that.
Makes sense.
As far as the products you have that would go with, like, let's say the new Matthews bow with the new bridge lock, do you guys already carry? You already have sights that actually fit that specifically, or are those still like something you're having a hard time getting?
That is probably the thing that's the hardest to get currently out of everything in the industry that I can see. We have probably a dozen to 15 of the Matthews sight itself, the one that Excel makes for them. And that is something we aren't allowed to ship. So you have to walk in the store to get it. So those aren't going to run away. Excel is on an 8-month backlog on average. So I love the fact that they made a universal dovetail for products and what have you. I think that was a great idea. I just really wish they didn't pick that brand because they're the most backlogged. So that part kind of sucks. We try to treat the accessory companies the same way we treat the bow companies, just blanket orders over long periods of time, and hopefully it works out. And in general, most of them do. And I'm starting to get to the point with Spot Hog now that I've had those blanket orders in for so long, I keep getting fed, so I keep getting product. I probably have 50 or 60 dovetail Spot Hog products in the store that have the new Matthews hardware that will line up left to right for them. We just got a batch of that, so it does line up left to right, comes with the appropriate stuff. Excel stuff, I probably still won't see for another 4 months. And then black gold, they have enough windage in their sight to compensate for that without an issue. You just need the right dovetail, and we've received 75 of those dovetails so far. But I ordered 200 of them as soon as they released it, because it coincides with every older sight that they had. So if you have a 3-year-old black gold sight, there's a good chance you can just buy that dovetail, put it on a Matthews V3 bridge lock, and rock and roll. So that's been a nicer way to do it. We buy, the way they priced it, you can buy just the direct mount sight and the dovetail, and it costs the same as ordering the sight with a dovetail on it. So you have more options at that point. So as long as I have that little bridge lock part, that dovetail piece, every black gold sight I have works on that bow, and it opens up the door for more options. Excel didn't price it out that way.
I assume though that people that buy that bow want one of those for sure, because I mean, why? I mean, that's like one of the main reasons to buy it, right? I know they probably don't want to run the old sight.
I actually think it boils more down to the quiver, because the quiver is so tight and light.
Okay.
So, because you can still run just about anything in that bow without an issue. It's when you go to put that quiver on, you have to have an integrated style rest, and you have to have an integrated sight, or it's going to touch. Now you can use the Low Pro 1 and a really shallow direct mount, like the Spot Hogs direct mounts, pretty skinny. Black Gold's Mountain Light series is pretty skinny, so you can usually sneak that quiver in and not have an integrate. But without the integrate dovetail option, you're kind of hosed there with anybody else's stuff. But if you use the 2-piece, it's actually tighter to the bow. It's like a 1/4 inch closer, so you can't clear anything. Like, you have to integrate, and even your Epsilon, which mounts on the side and goes behind but clears everything else, on that Low Pro 2 arrow number 5 coming from front to back at you, gets really close to touching the rest. So it's like the first one you pull out of the quiver to make sure it doesn't touch. And that's with an Epsilon that's tight. The MX integrates clear enough that you don't have to worry about that touch, but that it's just so tight with those things.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your store itself. Like, what brands do you carry? How big is it? I guess give us a little insight, for people who've been there, like where's it located, that type of thing.
So we're just outside of Spokane, Washington, in what's technically known as Green Acres. It's we're in between Spokane and Coeur d'Alene on the Washington-Idaho border in Washington. We started off as just a small little pro shop originally when my dad was around. We had a general sporting goods store in downtown Spokane. We're there for 22 years, and then moved out to the country out in Green Acres, and so we could be on an outdoor shooting facility with an indoor range, outdoor range, and all that, and just do archery. And that's a 3,000 square foot building that we added an upstairs onto. That's another 2,500 square feet, so about 5,500 square feet. And we have a 20-yard indoor range. We carry Hoyt, Matthews, Bowtech, PSE, Elite, Prime, Mission, Diamond. I think that's it. I try to keep them all straight, but it's a lot to keep in. And we're a dealer for everything under the sun. So whatever people are asking for, I will bring in. It doesn't matter to me. And every bow manufacturer, or just about every bow manufacturer, is capable of making a good bow. So I try to keep open accounts with all of them. And if somebody makes something that really sparks my interest or really well competes, I would definitely bring that product in and add it to my mix, because we sell enough of them anyway that I don't have to worry too much about losing a brand because I didn't sell enough of their product.
It's awesome.
Yeah. So do you get a lot more, and I'm just not familiar with that hunting area out there, but do you get a lot more like Western style shoots where they're going for elk or mule deer, that kind of thing, or is it more whitetail?
Yeah, no, that's way more common. Like in the state of Washington, you can hunt Rocky Mountain elk, Roosevelt elk, mule deer, whitetail deer, blacktail deer, bear, cougar. You can do 2 bears a year. I mean, we got a real big mix, and then you can draw moose, ram, goat, and I'm forgetting one. We got quite a variety, and we have some antelope, but there's not enough to hunt yet. And there's even some caribou in the far north portion of Washington, but not enough to hunt. So we've got a really broad mix. Now the seasons aren't great; they're pretty strict, and a lot of that stuff, like the draws for moose or bighorn or goat, takes 15 years to draw one on average. It's going to be hard. But we have quite a variety of stuff. So we have a good mix of everything, but there's a lot of open country scab land. There's a lot of mountain really mountainous, thick timber areas. I mean, we have kind of almost every kind of terrain, but I would say most people in this area that are building a bow are building it with the Western style hunting in mind. You're probably going to shoot a little farther. We have a lot of steep mountain areas, so you can like be on one side of a mountain and shoot across the other side of the mountain because they're like this.
And then hire somebody to go get it.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Yeah, you'll frequently like be on one side and you'll call an elk into the other side and they'll sit there and try to find you. Well, in some instances, that's only 70, 80 yards, so you can get pretty close and not even be on the same freaking mountain in certain instances. So, but it just depends on where you're at. If you head west and south of here, it's flat, it's scab land. You head north, you're up in the mountains. You head east, you're in the mountains. You head northwest, you're in the mountains. It's quite an interesting variety of terrain in this area. It's very unique.
You guys get milder weather over there because of where you're located with the mountains?
It varies a lot. I mean, we had a pretty decent amount of snow this year, and I swear when I was younger, we got more than we do now. But I would say, we usually get a foot or two of snow a year, a certain amount of precip, and we get a ton in the mountains. It stays in the mountains, but down here we'll have a month or two where we have to remove snow regularly, and then we'll get weather where it goes from freezing to not freezing, freezing to not freezing constantly. Pretty much all our snow's gone now, down low, and up high it's already starting to go. So, but it varies. We'll have one year where it's brutal. We'll have 2 feet of snow on the ground for 3 months or plus, and then you'll have another year where you got snow 5 times, but the mountains always get it no matter what.
Yeah. So that's a good mix of hunting out there, man. You guys got quite the selection of animals. I think you're talking about how long it takes to get elk tag and that kind of thing. It's kind of similar in Michigan, believe it or not. We have there's a herd in Michigan, upper part of the lower peninsula of Michigan, and it takes about 20 years to get a tag for that as well. So
you only get one.
That's kind of like the Michigan dream hunt there. So
everybody gun hunts them because you only get it one time, so there's no second chance. Like you're not getting close enough because Michigan's all flat land. It doesn't work like you can, like I haven't done Colorado or Washington or anything like that, so I don't understand like the mountain stuff compared to like yourself. But here it's flat land. So like when you see a deer at 80 yards out, you're not getting close to that deer. I mean, it's not going to happen. So in this case, same thing. And so most people will do a gun here when they pull that tag for their first time, but it's the odds you'll never get another one. So
Gotcha.
So do you guys sell broadheads too?
Yeah. We sell all kinds of broadheads.
So what do you usually, I mean, I don't know what the percentage is, but do you see guys more fixed or mechanical? 50-50?
We still primarily sell more fixed, and what you have to kind of see in our mix is most people are building and buying their stuff with the intent of hunting elk, and then they'll go hunt deer with that. And it's still more common to see a fixed blade broadhead get shot at an elk than a mechanical, just because of the loss of penetration, a little more resistance. And you're dealing with 800,000 pound animals instead of 200, 300 pound animals, and the hide's a lot thicker, like a lot thicker. So we definitely sell more fixed blade than mechanical, but mechanicals are legal here. They're legal in Oregon. They're not legal in Idaho, but they're talking about legalizing that this year, and they're legal in Montana. So there's a lot of states that you can hunt elk and you can legally use a mechanical. They're just not super common. And when we do sell mechanicals to people who elk hunt, they're usually smaller cutting diameters, like a Grim Reaper fatal steel. It's got a smaller cutting diameter. For the guys who have to use a Rage, their Plus P series, there's a smaller cutting diameter, so it penetrates a little better. I've shot 3 or 4 elk with one of those, and I've always gotten penetration out the other side without too much of an issue. But when I shoot a fixed blade broadhead, I will typically go clean through and keep going. And when I shoot a mechanical, you'll go through and poke out the other side, but you won't necessarily have your arrow completely pass through and be on the ground somewhere behind it. So just because of the size of the animal, we'll typically not see as much mechanical sales, but it's still probably 40% of our local sales. And then online, of course, you're going to sell more mechanical.
Yeah. Are most elk hunters, most elk hunters shooting 70-pound bows?
Yeah, that's definitely most common. We probably sell, I bet you we sell 90% 70-pound bows here.
Wow.
Now, granted, with like Matthew's system, for example, I mean, our biggest sellers Matthews, and you just change modules to change weight, so that's not a accurate assessment. But most guys who are getting the module and the bow when they buy it and leave are getting a 70 or 75-pound mod. It's way more common. I personally have a 60-pound bow that I build and use for deer hunting and bear hunting, and I don't use the extra weight because I don't feel I need it, but I still shoot 70 plus pounds of elk. But I pull those every day, so it's not like it's a burden by any means to pull it. But the average guy might be a little more of a struggle. But yeah, we're definitely selling more 70-pound bows than anything.
What would you say the average draw length is that you see the most common?
So the most common draw lengths go from 29, 28, 28 and a half, 29 and a half, 27 and a half, 30, and it keeps branching out from there. But 29 is still the most common, even though 28 to 28 and a half is probably realistically more common, but more people shoot too long a draw length. So you run into that more often than not. People tend to overbow themselves. It's a small man syndrome thing, I think, for one reason or another. Almost everybody shoots too long of a draw length. If I ever sit down and look at somebody and analyze what they're doing, I'm almost always saying, you need to take a half inch off of this to an inch off of this. You're overextending yourself too much. So, but now, yeah, 29 is most common for sure.
What do you recommend for, we just had this conversation on different podcasts. So I was going to ask you the question, since you're in the shop doing this every day. When you have when you have an arrow, and let's say someone's 29-inch draw, let's just say that, and their arrow length, if they're doing a drop away, do you usually take the broadhead would be in the shelf? You know what I mean? So like the arrow might be a 27-inch arrow, 28-inch arrow, or do you recommend the broadhead be in front of the shelf because it's a broadhead, I guess?
So if you follow my stuff, you'll see that I'm a pretty big advocate for a lighter weight arrow with more FOC. The only way you're going to accomplish that is by shortening the arrow as much as possible. By leaving an arrow, like let's say the bow's draw length is 29. The average bow, if it's a true 29, not a manufacturer says it's 29, actually measures 29 and a half. Let's just say it's actually 29. Almost every bow built that's 29 with a fall away rest on it, not like drastically backing it up, just a normal mounting position, is 2 inches short of that. So on actual arrow. So personally, I will pull a bow back with an arrow in it, mark the arrow at the launcher, add a half inch to that, and then go to the nearest quarter inch that it actually measures out in the saw, and that's how long I'll cut the arrow for somebody. 9 times out of 10, unless they want it different. And that's largely because every inch you cut off your arrow is like 3/4 of an inch better or forward to center percentage, and it's running a stiffer arrow. So you now don't need as stiff of an arrow to achieve this mentality where we want all this weight in the front of the arrow. It's like super common now, and almost everybody's talking about it to some degree or another. Well, there's ways that you can work that to your advantage, but you have to be willing to shorten the arrow on that, because now your arrow's got to be an inch longer to accommodate for that collar. That weighs more, so now you need a stiffer arrow. So now your arrow weighs more. Now you've lost more FOC. It's a cascading effect. So personally, I try to cut arrows a half inch in front of the launcher, and I don't use collars. I'll use steel one-piece inserts and things of that nature because they're way more durable than an aluminum one. But the collar is not something that I personally add to that. But yeah, typically a half inch in front of the launcher is where I try to get people to go. Everything seems to function better, and you don't need as stiff of an arrow to straighten it out with all that weight. You tune bows more and more and more, and you start doing that, and they tend to tune easier.
I feel like I just heard a record from the Victory Archery podcast.
No, I was thinking the same thing. It was like the exact same answer. Exact same answer.
That's why I was just curious. I was like, I gotta ask.
Who'd you talk to? Who was on your
Nate?
We're
talking to Nate there.
Oh yeah, I know Nate. Yeah. They all
knows the stuff, man.
They all shoot light GPI arrows and short and adapters in front, and we were talking about that when they first came out with light ones. I've been using an RIP Extreme Velocity or some variation thereof for like 5 or 6 years before most of them weren't even using it yet. I'm like, dude, you got to try this arrow, cut it down here, put a steel insert in it, and go shoot it at stuff, and it'll blow your mind what it will do. And it really will. I mean, the best place to have weight in your arrow is in the front of the arrow, hands down. But you don't want to end up in a situation where you're shooting something that's so slow that the animals can literally walk out of the way before the arrow gets there and look at it. I mean, that's a problem. So I try to shoot the lightest GPI arrow that I can that doesn't feel like it's going to break for no freaking reason at all, and put as much weight in the front as possible. And right now, in general, that's Victory or Black Eagle, depending on what diameter you're trying to do. But when you go to a Black Eagle, now you're dropping down into like an X Impact, where it's got a smaller OD, and you got extended pieces that stick out the front, and then you're creating another weak point. So It's really hard to beat 204 arrows because most of your insert components are inside the arrow and they're not extended out of the arrow. So you have way less failure, way less bending. And there's a lot of variety of choices in 204s as well. Gold tip airstrikes are really good. Easton just came out with that Sonic 6.0, which is basically a retreated hex. If I remember right, the GPIs and everything look just like the Torch or Hex from 4 years ago. They didn't do it in a 204, unfortunately. They went in that funky size that only they make. But those lighter GPI arrows in stiffer spines are really where it's at, if you ask me, hands down. It's the smartest thing to use overall. And it's regardless of what you're using it for. I use 400 grain setups on elk, and I've passed through lots of elk at farther distances without too much of an issue. If you have 15% in the front of that arrow, it's going the direction you point it when it hits the animal. It's not deviating in different angles, so it's pretty bomb proof.
If you grow your beard out another 4 inches, I swear we'd be talking to Nate right now.
I'll say.
Well, yeah, but if you put Nate next to me, Nate is not. Nate's like here.
Oh, so, yeah, okay. No. We saw both of you guys sitting down, so
yeah. Well, he's about as tall. He's kind of. I think he's about as tall as Dan, so I'm used to it. We have a block that I have Dan stand on when we're stand next to each other when we're filming, so it doesn't look ridiculous. But I'm like a foot taller than Dan. So
I love it. So what have you seen product wise has been like the most innovative thing or eye catching thing that you've seen? So whether it be rest, stabilizer, what do you
release,
like what's kind of the coolest thing that's caught your eye this year?
Well, honestly, and I think it's kind of a bit of a broken record, but integrating your sight through a riser is a pretty big deal. It really is, because it takes away so many problems that bows have had for so long. You're no longer having that lean feel. And I don't know if you guys have actually built a bow, fully integrated it and shot it, but it doesn't lean. It does not lean to if you're a lefty, it doesn't lean to the right when you fire it. And if you're righty, it does, or if you're righty, it doesn't lean to the right. If you're lefty, it doesn't lean to the left. And it's noticeably different. And by Matthews, because they own so much of the market, doing that and using a conventional normal sized thing that a lot of people already made, I think you're going to see every bow manufacturer go that way. Then you're going to see sights go that way. Now, as far as exciting, exhilarating sights, to me, I love the dual track, but good luck getting it. I mean, they can't. I've got 500 of those things on order, and I've seen 25 or 30 so far this year, and they've been making them since December. So they're way behind. So that one's a very, very exciting sight. I mean, I like the triple stack concept, but Spot Hog doesn't do rail leveling. So like the part that moves up and down, you can't adjust it this way. And that becomes a problem at distance. And as a Western hunter, which most of my clientele is, they expect to be able to shoot their bow 80, 90, 100 yards accurately. Now, I don't encourage them to hunt at that distance, but they expect to be able to shoot their bow that far. Well, if you can't adjust the rail, you're going to run into left-right problems, and none of the Spot Hogs do that. Well, Black Golds do that, CBEs do that, Excels do that. Almost every target site on the planet does that. That's a very common thing, and unfortunately, they don't do that. So if I had a choice and everything was widely available, the Landslide and the Dual Track are by far the two greatest sights on the market right now. By far, it's just good luck getting them. They're both pretty hard to get.
Yeah. And so as far as the bows go, I know obviously your YouTube channel's killing it, great job, over 1.1 million views. When you're seeing these bows, you're doing the videos. One of the things I noticed, and it's not I mean, it is what it is, but I'm just wondering from your perspective, it's been an issue at a pro shop level. Is the concept that Prime's inline doesn't go to 31-inch draw. And, they talked about in this podcast that, they just couldn't get to it with that cam. But are you seeing like a lot of issues where like people come in, they want a 31, they can't get in, they're mad at you, or like what are you seeing anything like that? Or
I've ran into that with different bows over the years when their draw length spectrums don't fit. But I don't know if it's just this area, but when Prime went away from their dual cam system to a singular cam system, I've had like 10 people come in and ask to see one this year. Is it now, which is abnormal. Like I probably had 40 or 50 people look at them last year by this time, maybe more. Prime's probably been my number 4 seller in the shop for the past couple of years. It hasn't been like a barn burner by any means, but Traditionally, it's usually either Matthews or Bowtech, and then Hoyt somewhere around there for us. And Matthews this year is definitely selling more. I sold more Bowtech than Matthews last year, but they're really busting the doors off. But I bet you I've had maybe 10, 15 people really ask to fire it. I've had people pick it up and look at it, but I haven't really had them asking to shoot it. Now, it's an amazing feeling bow. It really is, but it is a bit slower than the other bows in comparison as well. So we haven't done really well with it in that regard. And I don't think I have good information for you on whether or not there's a lot of negative feedback on the fact that they don't go longer than 30. I do think that's a very foolish thing, because there's an awful lot of people that have longer than the 30-inch draw length, and to not offer a product for them is basically, I don't know, I'm not going to say idiotic, but maybe it wasn't in the financial cards to be able to redesign it or make a different bow. I mean, you just make a different brace height bow with a longer axle to axle, and you can achieve that draw length on it. The fact that you're not doing it is kind of silly. But I've always questioned their mythology from their 135 standpoint, and the bows all have the same draw lengths.
Yeah, that's why I didn't understand that
seems
part. Yeah.
Well, they wanted to simplify everything, and I imagine it allowed the limbs to all work exactly the same at the exact same poundages, so they could simplify the number of parts that they have to make, would be my guess. But if you made a 6-inch brace height 1-inch 31-inch bow and a 6-inch brace height 35-inch bow, you'd end up with different draw lengths with that same cam assembly. But for one reason or another, they just don't. And maybe market does show that over 30 inches is a much smaller group of sales. So I get why they maybe felt they didn't need to. And maybe they're not selling so many bows that they really can justify covering 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 SKUs like some of the other manufacturers can. But I always kind of got the impression they did pretty good nationally, just not terribly good up here. So, but I don't know. That's kind of an odd one. I would have personally liked to see a longer draw length option from them.
So one of the things that was,
oh, go ahead, Tim. Sorry.
I was just going to say, one of the things that became really popular really quick were the carbon bows. But you kind of said, at least we've seen that kind of slow down in regards to people really getting into carbon bows and wanting that. Have you kind of seen that on your side as well?
Yeah, I think the idea at first was like really amazing hype, and it's a great idea when you think about it from a standpoint of when you see something that's aluminum and you see something carbon in other industries, it's like a drastically better, way lighter, really cool, blah blah blah, right? There's great advantages to that, but when you're putting out a product that's not really lighter or barely lighter, and up until this year, honestly, I'd never shot a carbon bow that felt better than its aluminum counterpart. If you really shot it a lot and worked with it a lot, they typically vibrated more. And that's typically a byproduct of a lighter bow. Usually a bow that weighs less will vibrate more. But this year, Hoyts feel better than their aluminum counterpart. That's the first time I've ever been able to say that. But that being said, you're also up to $800, $1,850, and $1,900. I mean, you're pushing yourself out of a consumer. And I don't, I try not to be really negative, but even in my bow reviews of those bows, I was like, I still don't see $1,900 in what this is. Is it nicer? Yes. Does it feel greater? Yes. Is it faster? No. Is it lighter? 3/10. I mean, that's not a lot. I mean, 2/10, 3/10, that's not drastic. So I just think if somebody would come to market with a $1,500 to $1,600 carbon bow, I think they'd crush it if it felt as good as their aluminum. I just think they've gone too far on the span of the difference in between them, to be honest. I think they're outpricing themselves.
Yeah, I wonder, and do you see a difference in because there's always this talk when I talk to like PSE suggests that, and I can't tell because I can't cut their bow in half, but they said their carbon bow has some sort of gel or something inside of it that takes away some vibration compared to Hoyt's, but I don't know like the inside difference. You know what I mean? Like, I
thought it was foam.
Something in there. I don't know what they said. They said there's some dampening thing built inside of it that's patented and whatever. They won't say exactly what's in there or anything, but I'm like, well, I should just buy and cut it in half, but
well,
let's see what we got here, folks.
Well, it depends. I mean, it depends on how bad you want to know. I wouldn't be opposed to it because I trade in ones and they don't resell super well. So I mean, I get a year-old one for about half ish. So I mean, it might be worth what, $800 to cut it in half and see what it looks like. But if that's true, I mean, Now I know everybody's got different feedback and responses of what things feel like, but when you put a levitate against RX-7 Ultra, that RX-7 Ultra has less vibration. Like in every one I've shot and every one I've tried. Now, granted, I've only shot 3 different levitates to be able to really see if maybe I happen to have one that vibrates worse. But they all kind of felt the same. They all pulled harder, and they all had quite a bit more vibration than the Hoyt. So if they do have some revolutionary stuff in there, I'm not sure what it's doing in comparison. But I know with the levitate, they designed that deliberately to try to be really aggressive, get a lot of velocity, and they achieved that. But when you do that, you typically have more residual vibration and more felt shock. Now, maybe I haven't felt one that feels incredibly better, and I know was it what Field and Stream or whatever gave it the best bow of the year thing, but I still don't see it in comparison. When you shoot an RX-7 Ultra against that, the RX-7 Ultra feels drastically better. And 9 out of 10 customers buy based off feel, at least for us. When you come in and test fire a bow, 9 out of 10 people are walking with the one that they felt best. So I'm not sure how that one's winning that argument, unless the people that were testing it, which were all industry people, realized that felt vibration isn't that important, and maybe stats are that important, because that bow is faster. It absolutely is, and it's got a more aggressive draw cycle, but you'll get used to that. So it's not really that big of a deal. But
I don't think I've ever actually shot that bow. Generally, when I deal with PSC, it's mainly just aluminum bows. I don't think I've only shot one of their carbon bows over the years. That's why I was asking the question, because I don't really have any experience with their carbon compared to I always shoot the Hoyt ones. Hoyt always takes partner stuff, but like PSC doesn't with the carbon section of it. So I don't ever know their carbon. I don't know. Just seems, because they're really the only competitor realistic. Because I mean, like Bowtech has one, but it's not really the same carbon, right? It's like some sort of different process.
So Bowtech has it's basically thermoplastic. They'll call it carbon because there's some carbon. I don't know if they sprinkle carbon dust in there or what they call it carbon, but it's basically thermoplastics, which Martin came out with a thermoplastic bow at 1.2. And there's only certain loads you can put it on that makes it handle, but it's injection molded carbon is what they call it. But I'm pretty sure it's thermoplastic, and they just call it something different.
How does that bow do for you, the Zion?
Oh, it does okay. We're unique because of where we're located, that we don't get a lot of mid-price customers, and I can't sell that bow online because they don't allow those sales. So I would say 9 out of 10 bows that get sold out of here are a high-end bow. They really are. We're just because of where we are. I've got a Cabela's and I've got a couple Sportsman's warehouses within a half hour of me, and now North 40s. There's at least 2 North 40s within a half hour of me that all sell entry-level bows. And most people that are looking at an entry-level mid-price bow is usually a converted gun hunter or a muzzleloader bow hunter. So they tend to buy that first bow from a place that sells guns. So, and I'm not a general sporting goods store. So that guy's normally not wandering around my store when he buys that mid-level price bow.
Makes sense.
But we do sell more of that bow in that price than any other bow in here. But I don't think I'm a good representation of that, to be honest, because of my location. Like I said, we're out in the sticks. People aren't just walking in to buy their first bow from me. They walk in to buy their first bow from somebody else, get frustrated because it doesn't work right, and then they find it. And then we fix them from there, and then they usually those people will retain. They'll get a lot better at the sport, and then they'll understand why a bow costs $1,200 instead of $800. So that second sale isn't usually an $800 bow; it's a $1,200 bow, because
makes sense.
Yeah,
makes sense. So what's been your favorite video you've worked on recently? Because I know you've launched a couple videos, like this twin turbo one. Was that as fast as you were thinking it was going to be, or how'd you feel about that?
Yeah, I expected it to be about that speed. I expected most published bows to be somewhere between 12 and 25 slow of what they're published at. And that bow, after how it felt, I actually thought it might be a couple feet a second faster after I pulled it back for the first time, especially at 80%, because there's just no valley. It's like
what,
to go
5.5 or something brace height?
No, it's actually, so they call it 5 7/8, but it measured 6. Like I put a tape on it with the grip on, and it measured 6. So I'm not sure why they called it 5 7/8 other than to call it a speed bow. But yeah, the one I got was 6, and I've gotten 3, and they all measured 6. So I'm not sure why the difference there, but and it felt like a fine bow, but I don't know if I'd give up the
Comfort.
feel and smoothness and comfort of another bow for
Yeah.
how aggressive that bow feels. But once again, you'll get used to it. It's just most people in my experience over the years, which I mean, I've been selling people bows since I was like 11. I'm 42.
Wow.
So
Holy
I was born into this field, and I was really good at archery since I was very little. And I was shooting a bow when I was like 5. So I've dealt with people a lot, and almost every person that buys an aggressive bow trades that bow in a year.
Wow.
A guy that buys
about-
a forgiving bow or an accurate bow, I don't get that bow traded in for 3 to 5 years on average. So
Between the Bowtechs for this year and the stuff you're
Mhm.
selling right now,
Mhm.
what's selling better for you, the CP28 or the SR350 at this point, I guess?
Revolt XL is my best selling Bowtech at the moment.
So there you go.
Yeah.
So it's not even
So
those
it's well, if you look at a Western bow, typically a Western bow is a little longer, a little higher brace height.
Makes
Neither
sense,
of those
yeah.
two bows are that. If I was an
Yeah.
Eastern place, I'd probably sell quite a bit more CP28s, I would think, because that's really
Yeah.
more of an ideal tree stand, ground blind, shorter distance bow. But typically, once again, my customers kind of get an education when they come in, so they understand what makes a bow shoot well and what doesn't. And once they've been in once or twice, asked enough questions, they're most likely not buying an extreme bow. They're usually buying something that's a little more forgiving. So I'll probably sell more Revolt XLs overall in the year. The SR350 will probably be the second best seller. I'll probably actually sell Revolt X80s more than CP28s because I got a lot of meatheads running around the Pacific Northwest. They want to have that extra little juice, and as much as it's kind of silly, we do sell a decent amount of them. But yeah, CP28 is something that I'm not going to sell a lot of because majority of people don't buy a bow for that purpose here.
Yeah.
They'll make another bow work for that purpose. They'll still do that, but there's not a lot of people around here that primarily tree stand and ground blind hunt.
Yeah, it's opposite here in Michigan. We all
Exactly.
CP28 would be a huge seller here.
Oh yeah,
compared to the
100%.
others because of that. All tree stand hunting, 20-yard shots, 6.
Oh yeah,
it's very easy hunting here when it comes to that. It's not like what you guys are doing.
Well, and if I was in that environment, I'd use that bow, and I would buy a V3X29 instead of a 33 if I was in that environment, because that fits the environment. It makes perfect sense.
Yeah, there's such a variety. Hey, what's your thoughts on I don't know if you had a chance to shoot this bow. I didn't see it on your show, but the APA stuff. Do you ever had a chance to shoot the 100-pounder?
So no, I've had to shoot 100-pound bows before. I get clients that go to Africa and things of that nature, and they'll end up with 90 to 100-pound bows to hunt elephants. I got a bow downstairs right now for a guy that's gonna go on a Cape Buffalo hunt in 6 weeks. So that's got to be excessive energy and excessive. Now bows are putting out enough energy now. You don't have to use 90 or 100 pounds, but I've had to do it before on a couple of different occasions. But that being said, once again, that's one of the bows that falls under the I need to be asked 25 times a year or more for one before I would carry it. And APA, I just don't get asked for it around here. I do get asked periodically. That one. That's one I get asked for more than some of the other ones, but it doesn't quite hit 25. And then the other one would be Athens. I get asked about Athens, but not 25 times a year. And if I don't get at least asked about it 25 times a year, I'm not very likely to sell very many of them. So it's hard to bring it in.
What about Darton?
I'd be happy to review them. Darton, I do get some asks for, and they've got a good sales rep in this area. He actually used to be the PSE rep, so he's got a long list of relationships with people. So you're starting to see Darton in this area. And he's supposed to come up, and I'm going to review a few of them. And I was actually moderately impressed with what they made last year. Honestly, it was actually pretty decent. It tested out kind of well. I never made a video on one, but I told him I'd take a look at it because I have a personal relationship with the guy. So I'll try to help him out if I can move it. But once again, I haven't had 25 people walk in my door and ask about Darton. So it's hard to warrant putting it on my wall.
Darton's a Michigan company, and they were so big here, when we were younger, like huge company. I mean, Darton was probably one of the first deer I ever killed was with Darton. And I dealt with Darton for years. And then they slowed down their marketing back in like 2014. We did a lot with them when we started BowhunterPlanet back in the day. And then after that, they kind of just went quiet. I don't know, Tim, if you would agree with that. They literally just went dead quiet, and they didn't do any more marketing, at least with us, they didn't do anything like that. And then Randy bought them from Black Eagle Arrows. So now they own them. And so now I think he's in that process of trying to get it, and Randy knows marketing. He's the kind of guy who knows,
Randy's a great guy.
Yeah. He's like, I got to get this in front of these people and get in front of whoever I can, but I think he's working on it. I think it's taken a lot more than he thought. It's not easy to own a bow company. That's for sure.
It would be really, really difficult to compete in that market against Matthews, Hoyt, and Bowtech, probably in that order. As far as marketing, and I mean, it's so difficult to make a bow without paying a ton of patent rights and royalties to people, because almost everything that you would incorporate into your bow, somebody else has a right on. I remember, I'm sure this isn't true, but I used to have a relatively good relationship with the guys at Alpine before they sold that company and moved on. But they had something like $120 into patent and royalty rights before they ever started making a bow.
Wow.
For everyone they made. Like, I got to pay $120 to somebody else.
I think part of that might have been to Darton.
At that time, probably in the
yeah. No, there's definitely some of that, but that's a tough one. But yeah.
Did you ever see the video?
Darton's one to look at.
Did you ever see the video of Jason Ballas from Outdoor Product Review when that Alpine blew up on him? Hit him in the
I
face.
vaguely remember that. Yeah.
I called him on that. I called him like, I don't know, it was like 2 years ago. I said, Jason, do you think it'd be okay if I use that video? It was like a training thing. He's like, oh yeah, do what you want with it, man. I was like, oh my gosh, that is going on TikTok for sure. So I think, it comes over and it like falls all apart and it hits him like right above the eye. He had to get stitches. I was like, oh my gosh, dude. I was like, that was crazy, but I've never seen that. And I was talking to Darton about that video, and they said that's what they call a catastrophic explosion. It doesn't happen very often, they said, at least not in their bows. And he said that's like a big deal, like if something like that happens. So they have to take, if that happened to Darton, you have to take every single piece you can recover and send it back to them, so they can literally rebuild the bow and figure out what the hell happened. I was like, wow, that's insane.
What's the dumbest thing you've seen a customer do?
Oh, you put me on the spot there. Okay, so I'll tell you a fun story. So there was a period of time where we were open on the weekends when we had enough help to try to see if it increased sales. Every time we tried to be open on like Sunday and Monday, it never did. We ended up being open more, having more man hours, and never sold any more goods because of it. But I was always on call on Sundays in case it got really, really busy. And I had an employee that I love dearly. He's kind of like a son to me a little bit. Really, he's still in the industry. He's not here anymore. He moved away and worked for another shop. But he was the guy who never knew how to say no, or couldn't ever tell somebody no. So he had somebody come in and demand that he change his strings. Well, he waited. And on weekends, we don't do service work. You have to leave it. Drop it off. We'll call you when it's ready. You come get it. We don't do it while you wait in that instance. And I got called from him on a Sunday that he said he's just busy as all get out and I need help. And I come in and he's putting the guy's strings on my day off, making me come in to work. And I was just like, oh, you've got to be kidding me. So I started helping people out and whatnot. And I knew the customer. He always had kind of an attitude. He wasn't the nicest guy in the world. So I could see where he got kind of talked into it, although wouldn't have been able to talk me into it, but I see where he got talked into it. We used to have a bow scale out where you could check the weight yourself as a consumer, right? And he gives the bow back to him. Everything's perfect. He shot it through paper. It's a clean hole. Everything's where it's supposed to be. He picks it up. He walks over to the scale, pulls it back, and blows his bow up.
Oh,
I knew you were gonna say, when you said used to, I knew there was something coming.
We do not put a bow scale out where a customer can touch it.
Oh my god.
But yeah, and so he walks out, and I just looked right at him, and he goes, "That's karma, man." I had no way to fix it. He blew up a cam. It was the only string left in the store that would fit his bow, and he was trying to go hunting in 2 days. And I'm like, well, there you go.
We got another bow here for you.
Yeah. He just gathered up his stuff. Gathered up his stuff and walked out. Because if you pull down on a scale like that and rotate your hands, you'll pull the string right off the cam.
Yeah,
which is why you don't let people have that.
Yeah,
very easy to do.
Crazy.
So that was probably the most interesting story I think that I could probably.
I was at when I first started BowhunterPlanet back in 09, I used to go into a local pro shop here, and I'd sit down and talk to the owner like yourself. I'd come in just like, hey, you know, I just want to learn, right? I just want to learn anything I could about the industry. So I sit there like I had like every other Friday off at work. So I go in and hang out with Jim at his shop, and I'd sit there for hours just hanging out with him. And this one day I'm sitting there, and this guy, this is a Matthews dealer, right? So you shoot, you know, mainly Matthews' big thing there, Hoyt Matthews Prime at the time. This guy pulls back this bow, and it says do not pull the bows back. Like it literally says that, but he didn't have it zip tied. They like literally says do not pull these bows, you know. So this guy pulls it back, and you know, of course, he dry fires this Matthews bow. It's like a Z7 at the time. I don't know what it was, whatever it was in 2012, 2009, over there, somewhere there. Dry fires it, it blows up, right? So Jim gets up, and I was like, oh my God, this guy is dead. Like he is gonna kill this guy. But the guy was bleeding. And so Jim, I think all of a sudden I think he went from being pissed to being like nervous. You know what I mean? Because the guy, the string caught his chin, and he was like, it cut like a skin off, you know, it was like flapping like on his so he I think he went from like seriously pissed off to like, oh shit,
is my insurance
med kit. I send that the guy got lucky, he was bleeding. That's all I gotta say. He would have left there bleeding either way.
Man, you remember that one day at the ATA show, we were watching people shoot at the shooting lanes.
Oh God.
And somebody, what was it? It was somebody didn't put the arrow on the rest right, and
no
it
arrow
fell off. And he shot it, and all you hear is the biggest whack in the world when that arrow comes off, and it hits his arm, goes flying like 30 feet to the right, like straight right angle to the right down the shooting lanes. And everybody just looks like, holy crap. The guy just takes the bow, looks at it, and you could see the huge welt on his forearm, right? I mean, this
I don't
thing
know what hit his arm or how.
He just looks at it, he puts the bow down and walks away.
That was scary. That was over by Darton, I think. I don't know whose bow
wasn't
it was.
Me.
I think it was a PSE bow or something. Oh my God. Those guys. What's your thoughts on this? You know, I know you mentioned you guys do some crossbow, not a ton, but what's your thoughts on the 500 feet? You know, I mean, is this too much, too little? Where are you at with that in your mind, at least?
You know, I've never been one to try to restrict speed and say that there's a too much thing there. I mean, that I'd like to see full seasons everywhere where that's considered a legit weapon, just like everything else. And there's a lot of states that don't have them. And I mean, it's still slower than a bullet by quite a long shot.
By a long
shot. I don't see an issue there. I shoot compounds a lot faster than most people say you should. I tune broadheads a lot faster than most people say you should, and I've never really had issues. But it's a matter of working through it. When you get up to that 500 feet a second, you can't just screw something on and hope it's going to work. You're going to have to test it a little more thoroughly. You're going to have to prove it a little more thoroughly. And if a person's going to take it seriously, then I don't see any issue with it. But the faster you go, the more finicky things are. And you just have everything just has to be that much more perfect.
Yeah, I think that's one of the things that's a little bit different about crossbows and compounds is the advertised speed. And compounds is usually less, right? When you actually shoot them and throw them through a chrono. The crossbows that we've been seeing have actually been more. Like that 500 that Raven, we threw it through, and I think it came out at 507. I want to say maybe 503 or 507.
No, 508, I think.
Was it 508?
Yeah, it was like 508, and the 10 point came in at
513. Yeah. So so the 10 point nitro has a 505, and that actually came in at 513. But we see that kind of consistently across crossbows is that if they say 440, you're probably getting somewhere around 444, 445 or something like that. So it's pretty as advertised in that world, which is unique.
Well, it is from a standpoint that people haven't really been, progressively running to the store to buy a new crossbow that's 4 feet a second faster than last year's crossbow.
Right.
So they've always published a speed that just simply says, because it's being drawn to the same length for everybody. So there's really no variables.
Right.
So it draws from here to here, no matter what. And they tell you what weight they shot it with and what arrow they put through it at what weight. It's a pretty fair test, and it should be duplicatable no matter what. Whereas in the compound archery thing, there's all kinds of funky business.
Oh, the arrow alone, how many variables do you have on that? I mean, we talked all about the arrow length and where you know what I mean?
Yeah, you can make 4 arrows that all weigh the same, shoot different speeds through a bow, but they go a lot farther than that. What they're testing, you can't functionally use in any facet. And I've got a video list about yay long of ideas. It's just like one line, and one of them is to cover everything that a bow manufacturer typically does to make their bow go faster in a test. So the average consumer realizes that this is how much you should take off of that speed is the best you're ever going to get on something that you're actually going to be able to functionally use.
For a hunting rig,
because there's just a whole bunch of funny business with that, and I wish they'd kind of stop that. I mean, you at least got to put something you could functionally shoot down range that you're testing. You can't say, if you draw the bow back till it stops and fire at the millisecond it stops, that's how fast the bow is. It's like, well, I understand it's faster that way, but you can't shoot it that way. So why would you test it that way?
Yeah, absolutely.
But each one of those little things that they do adds a foot here or 2 feet there to get that extra 10 to 15 that they're supposedly getting.
Claiming.
That they're claiming. But even some of them, when you get a big variable, you'll call them and talk to them about it, and they'll tell you that, well, this is what we got, and it's not that number. It's close to that number, but it's not that number. And I think they're just worried that if they're not launching a product that's faster than last year's product or faster than brand A, B, C, or D, that they're not going to sell. So they just keep kind of fudging a little more and a little more.
Perception, yeah.
It is.
Well, we've had that even in our own videos where we've shot them, and we've had to call, the manufacturer and be like, listen, we're just not seeing it on here. And there's been a couple times where they've asked for it back, right? Where they want to do testing on that one that we've shot, and they sent us another one, and we've gotten a different result with it. So, it's kind of, but that's a thing though, is like a lot of people are buying for weights nowadays. They want that bigger speed, but in all honesty, it doesn't really matter, right? I mean, there's a lot of people that end up coming in, buying their first bow thinking, my first bow, I need a 70 pound and I need it as fast as possible. But you're going whitetail hunting. And
it depends what you're doing, though.
Right?
He's not whitetail hunting.
Right.
It does matter.
Yeah.
It does matter, Tim, for him.
That's deer, why it is a subspecies of deer, but it's quite a bit bigger.
No doubt. No doubt.
Yeah, whitetail. Most of the philosophies and things that people are all focused on are just idiotic for a 200-pound animal or a 300-pound animal. You don't need that. Now, if your bow's not tuned right, sure, you do. But because every time, if you have a bow that's not tuned and that arrow does this in flight, it's losing energy every time it does that. And by the time it gets to the animal, it's lost 20, 30, 40% of its energy on top of what it already normally would have lost. And that's where you run into problems. If things are tuned correctly and your broadhead and your field point are going in the same spot, you're going to go through whatever you shoot at, unless you shoot it in the hardest part of the animal, which you shouldn't be shooting at. Anyway.
So that brings up a great question for you. This one you're going to love, because technically, since you're a pro shop, you're doing all this. When it comes to tuning, those bow manufacturers, right? We got Elite, we got Bowtech with these systems that they have to help tune their bow, and then you got Matthews. Who's the easiest to tune for you as a pro shop out of those brands?
Oh, Bowtech.
That's what I figured, because
not even close,
right?
I would love if everybody would be able to license that technology and put it in their bow, because it makes my job super easy. Now, granted, it also allows a consumer to monkey with it, and that can be good and bad. It's very hard to beat Matthew's top hat system because a consumer is not typically going to be able to monkey with it. So once we set a wheel lean and the wheels are leaned correctly and it's tuned correctly, they can't really screw it up. Whereas if you start monkeying with your drive system on a Bowtech, it's pretty easy. It's very easy to change. But for the moderately educated consumer, it's great, because if he's got a problem, he can call me and I can tell him what to do, and he doesn't need any additional parts. I'd love to see that system, but it would almost be awesome if we could permanently lock it and unlock it with a button once they understood what they were doing.
One of those security screws, that you need a special tool.
Yeah, go ahead and do it. All right, now you get done. Good. Lock that bitch back down. Don't touch it. but yeah, as far as ease of tunability, I mean, you can't beat that system. I mean, these shim adjustable systems are way beyond what we used to have to mess with, and they're great, but they're still somewhat coarse adjustments. You can make as small of an adjustment as you want with that cam system, and you can't beat that. So I like to do, when I'm setting up a bow to begin with, I like to draw it back in a draw board all the way, put a spot hog laser on the cams and make sure they're pointed perfectly straight at each other. And with that, I can actually draw it back, put the laser on it, walk over and turn it till it's pointed perfect, lock it down, do the other side, and it's done. They're square. And if you do that with that bow and you have a reasonably spined arrow, and that rest is 13/16 off at a 90-degree angle, and the time it's shooting a hole through paper, or it's defective. Like, it'll shoot a perfect bullet every time you fire it. You'll never have to move it if those are perfectly pointed at each other. And that's hard too. Well, it is. it is if you can actually do it that easily. It's when you have to start disassembling and reassembling things to try to get it right, which is part of the beauty of what we do. Is a bow won't leave here like that wrong. It won't. Like, we're assemble it, tune it, get it square, shoot it through paper, everything's perfect. Have a nice day. Yeah. And then I don't see it with problems later, and we can function and manage with the staff that we have, selling 700, 800 bows a year to people, and actually being able to maintain it, because you're not fixing stuff all the time that doesn't work correctly.
Too cool. All right, Josh, thanks, man. I appreciate you coming on with us and hanging out. This is a good time. I learned a lot of stuff today, so I appreciate that. It's really nice to talk to someone who does it at a pro level, in my opinion. When it comes to tech stuff, it's really eye-opening. So you learn a lot doing this stuff. And I've always looked at myself as more of a consumer-based person. Like, I'm a guy who walks into the store and buys something. I'm not someone who's a tech person. Like, so I love watching your stuff for that, to get more of the deep diving into the, bows and all that stuff. It's really good information. And if you guys haven't seen it, Podium Archer on YouTube, awesome content, amazing detail. And Josh does not mess around. Obviously, he knows his crap better than anybody I've seen. So
you're going to see a lot more. You're going to see a lot more of the technical aspect of it this year.
Awesome.
So excellent. we've gone through most of the bow reviews, and I'm going to start working down more of the technical stuff. I want people to get better, and it's blatantly obvious that there's a lot of parts of the country that don't have a lot of help. So they're using the resources that they have access to, and hopefully that'll make a difference to most people.
No, that's awesome, man. We can't wait to see the stuff, man.
I know who I'll be calling when I have questions on these bows. So
you're in trouble. You're in trouble.
You got my cell phone number. Just don't publish it.
Yeah, I'll be calling. Got a lot of questions here and there, and I get real confused. I'm like, oh man, I don't get it. All right,
Happy to help, man.
Thanks a lot, man. We'll see you.